Say it again, old man. The drunk man's voice cracked through the night, but Thomas didn't speak. He just stared, eyes steady, jaw set, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. The man shoved him once, twice, hard enough that the wooden stick in Thomas's hand hit the ground with a dull thud. Still no sound, not even a blink. Then, with one slow movement, Thomas raised the stick upright, letting it rest against his shoulder like a soldier remembering orders he never forgot. The laughter around him faltered. "He's deaf or crazy," one muttered. They didn't know that 20 years ago, in that same street, their father stood laughing too, the night his son's body was left in the dirt, and the law called it an accident. The courthouse lights glowed behind him like a lie that refused to die. He turned his back to them and began walking, each tap of his stick sharp as a gunshot against the wet pavement. The world had forgotten his name, but he hadn't forgotten theirs. The town had learned to live with the silence. Every night, same hour, same road, he'd appear from the shadows and walk past courthouse like a clock that refused to stop ticking. Children whispered stories about the quiet man with the stick, how he could curse you with a stare, how his footsteps came right before the storm. To Thomas, the walk wasn't curse or habit. It was the only thing left that still made sense. He had once been a father, a husband, a factory guard with a soft laugh and rough hands. That was before his boy, Mark, 17 and full of fire, had walked home from his friend's house one night and never made it past the corner where the Calter boys waited with a bottle and a truck. They said it was a drunken race gone wrong. The court called it an accident. The town called it unfortunate. Thomas called it murder, but only in his head. He hadn't spoken a word since that day. He didn't shout when the verdict came, didn't cry when the judge shook hands with the mayor, didn't breathe when the Calter family smiled for the cameras. His wife, broken by silence, moved away to her sister's home up north. She died years later, and the letter that told him so arrived with a return address he never opened. He kept it folded in his jacket pocket, like a wound you don't show anyone. Tonight, the courthouse clock struck 11 as he reached the steps. He stopped there, just as he always did, and stared at the doors where justice once pretended to exist. The rain tapped on his shoulders like impatient fingers. Across the street, 2 guards smoked under the awning, ignoring him. One of them muttered, "That ghost back again," and they laughed, but the laughter didn't last long. Thomas turned his head slightly, his gaze sharp as a blade, and for a moment when the guards froze. Something in those eyes didn't belong to the living. Thomas moved on, past the courthouse, past the alley where his son's name was once spray-painted in red. He stopped there every night, not to remember, but to measure time. The paint was gone now, replaced by a new billboard showing Ryan Calter's campaign for town council, building a better tomorrow. The slogan glared down at him like an insult carved into glass. He stepped closer until the stick touched the base of the billboard. His reflection stared back from the wet plastic, an old man, gray hair plastered by rain, eyes hollow but awake. He pressed his palm against it for a moment, then withdrew, leaving a smear of rainwater that looked almost like a handprint of blood. His walk home took him through the narrow back lanes that wound behind the old steel factory. The smell of rust still lingered there, mixed with oil and damp earth. Every time he passed the gates, he heard echoes. His son's laughter when he'd sneak in to wait for him after work, the sound of his boots on the gravel, the call of Dad, "I got you something." He had never told anyone what that something was. It still sat on his nightstand, a small brass whistle with the Dad etched unevenly on one side. Thomas carried it in his pocket every night, his thumb tracing the letters like a prayer. When he reached his apartment, he wiped the water from his face and stood at the door a moment before unlocking it. The room was dim, one small lamp casting a pool of light on the table. On that table lay his black notebook, open where he'd left it. Inside, 3 names written neatly, one on each line: Ryan Calter, David Hensley, Luke Marsh, the 3 men who had walked away from his boy's grave with clean hands and dirty hearts. Beneath them, a 4th name was half-written, but not finished: the judges. Thomas stared at it, his breathing steady, his silence filled with a new kind of weight. He set the stick beside the table, leaned on it for a second, then walked to the window. From there, he could see the courthouse tower glowing in the rain, the light blinking like a heartbeat that wouldn't die. He took the folded letter from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table beside the notebook. It had been 20 years, and he still hadn't read it. His wife's handwriting stared at him through the damp envelope. Uneven, trembling, but strong. He reached for it once, then stopped. The stick slipped slightly, hitting the floor with a hollow sound. He bent, picked it up, and ran his hand along the smooth wood. The marks on it, tiny nicks and scars, told its own story. He had carved them himself. One for every year since the trial. 20 cuts. Tonight, he drew a fingernail over a fresh spot near the handle, marking 21. When he looked up again, something moved outside, a flash of headlights, the shape of a car slowing in the street below. He stepped to the window and saw Ryan Coulter's sedan pulling up outside the courthouse across the road. Ryan got out, laughing with 2 men, his expensive coat shining under the rain. For a second, Thomas's eyes met his reflection in the car window. Ryan looked up, squinting into the darkness, unsure. Then he turned away and walked inside, still smiling. Thomas didn't move. The stick in his hand pressed against the floor, the muscles in his arm tight. The clock on the wall ticked once, then stopped, its second hand frozen at 11:47. The sound of rain filled the room again, steady, relentless, cleansing. He walked to the table, opened a notebook, and drew a small beside Ryan's name. His hand didn't tremble this time. Then he placed a whistle next to it, the soundless promise of a voice that would be heard again, just not with words. The thunder outside rolled like something waking from a long sleep. Thomas reached for his coat, pulled the hood over his head, and took the stick. The last light in the room flickered as he opened the door. When it closed behind him, the echo of his footsteps filled the hall. Soft, slow, deliberate. Tap, 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 each one sharper than the rain. Across the street, the courthouse clock struck midnight. And this time, it sounded different, like it was finally counting down. Don't look back. The word slipped from Thomas's mind like an old command, one he had lived by for 2 decades. But tonight, as Ryan Calder stumbled out of the courthouse bar, Thomas did look back, and he didn't look away. From across the street, hidden under the halo of a dying streetlight, he watched the man who took everything from him light a cigar and laugh with 2 young lawyers. The sound carried across the rain, echoing the same laughter Thomas heard on the night they found his son's body. His fingers tightened around the stick. For 20 years, he had walked this road without purpose. Tonight, he was following. Ryan didn't notice him at first. Few people ever did. An old man in a gray coat, moving slow, face half hidden under a worn cap. Thomas kept his distance, his limp measured, his eyes sharp. Every step had weight now. He had studied these streets, every corner, every blind turn. Ryan walked confidently toward the upper district, where the lamps shone brighter and the sins had cleaner. Thomas followed quietly, his shadow stretching and folding under the passing cars. He didn't hurry. Patience was his only weapon, and he had sharpened it for 20 years. He watched Ryan stop at a street vendor, buy a newspaper, tip the man too much, and grin like he was buying decency with spare change. Thomas's jaw flexed. His heart didn't race anymore. That part of him was long dead. What lived now was memory, cold and exact. Ryan paused at a light, phone in hand, face lit by the glow of his screen. Thomas's eyes caught the reflection, a headline flashing on the screen. Call to confirm for town council. He looked away, his breath steady. Ryan crossed the street. Thomas followed. When the man reached his car, a black sedan gleaming under rainlight, he fumbled for his keys. That's when Thomas stopped. He stood under the opposite awning, his stick planted firm, his stare locked on the car window. For a brief second, Ryan's reflection caught it. 2 eyes in the dark, steady and unblinking. Ryan froze, keys half raised, his smile fading just enough to show fear. He turned, scanning the street, but there was only rain. Thomas stepped back, blending into shadow, his silence louder than a threat. Ryan shook it off, slid into the car, and drove away. Thomas watched the taillights vanish into the fog. His reflection lingered in the puddle, a ghost without a grave. He began to walk again, slower now, his limp heavier. His mind replayed the image. The same smirk, the same careless ease. He could see his son again, Mark, 17, laughing as he showed off the wooden whistle he'd made in shop class. "Listen, Dad," he'd said, blowing a shrill, proud note. That sound haunted him more than the screams. He touched the whistle in his pocket, the metal cool against his fingertips. The rain masked the tremor in his hand. He knew where Ryan lived now, had written down 100 times. Tonight had only been confirmation. But one memory kept his steps slow. Mark's face after the verdict. He'd seen it only once more, a photograph from a morgue. His son's eyes were still open, as if they'd been waiting for him to speak. Thomas hadn't spoken then either. The guilt lived in his silence. The silence had become his punishment and his power. Back home, he wiped the rain from his coat and set the stick beside the door. The notebook lay open on the table. Beside Ryan's name, he added one word in neat, steady letters. Watched. He sat in the dark, the ticking clock behind him marking seconds he no longer counted. His eyes drifted to the window, where the faint reflection of the courthouse tower glowed. He could almost hear his wife's voice again, soft, tired, asking him to let go. "You'll lose yourself in this, Tom." Maybe he already had. But losing himself was the only way to find the truth again. He rose from the chair, opened the small wooden box on the shelf, and pulled out a folded paper. The edges were yellow with time, an old police report marked closed. He smoothed it out on the table, tracing the typed lines. No witnesses. Alcohol confirmed. Victim unresponsive. Suspects released due to lack of evidence. He had read those words 1,000 times, memorized every lie printed on them. But tonight, something new caught his eye, a name in the corner, witness statement, withdrawn Officer H. Dent. He frowned. He knew that name. Henry Dent, retired now, lives 3 streets over. He hadn't seen him in years. The night shifted around him. He stood, grabbed his coat, and took the stick. The streets were quieter now. The rain had stopped, but the air still hummed with what it left behind. Thomas's steps echoed on the pavement. When he reached Dent's house, he paused at the gate. Lights off, curtains drawn, the front yard overgrown. He tapped the stick lightly once, twice. The sound seemed to travel further than it should. Then, from inside, a lamp flicked on. A silhouette moved across the window, slow, cautious. The door creaked open. "Who's there?" a rough voice called. Thomas didn't answer. He just stepped into the faint light, his face half-lit. The man squinted, recognition slowly dawning. "Thomas." The old officer's tone cracked. You still alive?" Thomas said nothing. He only lifted the folded report in one hand, rain dripping from its edge, and let it fall at the man's feet. Henry Dent looked down, then back up, his eyes wide. "That case. You don't know what you're doing. Let it go." Thomas's stare didn't move. Dent's breath caught. "You're still digging?" he whispered. "After all these years?" Thomas raised the stick slightly, not in threat, but in reminder. Dent swallowed hard. "It wasn't my choice," he muttered. "They made me sign it. Coulter's father. He ran everything back then. Money, press, police. You think anyone could fight that?" Thomas stayed silent. The stick lowered, touching the ground with a hollow sound. Dent's voice broke. "You don't understand. I tried." Thomas turned, walking away before he could finish. Dent's words followed him into the rain. "They'll kill you if you touch it again." He didn't turn back. The wind carried the words away, but not the truth buried beneath them. The courthouse clock began to chime in the distance, slow and heavy. Thomas stopped at the end of the street, the light glinting off his wet stick. The town was asleep, but one set of eyes had finally opened. He looked toward the courthouse tower one last time, the clock's glow reflecting in his eyes. The silence around him felt alive now, a living, breathing promise. He exhaled once, steady and slow, as if releasing 20 years of waiting into the night. Then he whispered, the first word he'd spoken in 2 decades, rough and quiet like gravel breaking. "Soon. Stop following me." Ryan's voice cracked through the rain, sharp with fear, but the streets swallowed it whole. No answer came. only the steady rhythm of a stick tapping on wet concrete. Slow, deliberate, impossible to mistake. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came closer, then paused. Ryan turned, his suit drenched, hair plastered his forehead. "Who's there?" He barked, trying to sound brave. The alley behind him was empty, just pools of rain reflecting the faint orange glow of a flickering lamp. Then the stick tapped again, once like an answer. His eyes darted toward the corner, but all he saw was a dark shape moving behind the mist. He stepped back, fumbling for his phone. His hands trembled so hard the device slipped and shattered on the ground. The screen flickered, showing his own terrified face. He cursed, then ran. But the sound followed, slow, patient, steady. Thomas didn't chase him. He walked, one limp step at a time, the stick guiding him like a metronome of vengeance. The rain slicked his coat to his frame, his breath visible in the cold air. He had followed Ryan for days now, mapping his routine, the bars, the late drives, the quiet phone calls in his car. Tonight, Ryan had left alone, drunk and arrogant, his secrets too heavy to hold. Thomas had waited until the world grew still enough for justice to breathe. The alley forked into two paths. Ryan hesitated, glancing behind him. The old man's shadow stood at the mouth of the alley, motionless, a trick of the light. He told himself it had to be. He ducked left, sprinting toward the streetlight ahead, shoes splashing through puddles. His breath came in sharp bursts, but the tapping sound didn't fade. It moved slower but closer, as the space itself bent to close the distance. Ryan turned another corner and froze. The road ahead was blocked. Construction barriers, a trench full of rainwater. He spun around, but the alley was empty again. For a moment, all he heard was his own heartbeat and the whisper of rain sliding off rooftops. He exhaled, rubbing his face. "It's just in your head," he muttered. Then something rolled out of the darkness and hit his shoe. A wooden whistle, the same one his lawyer had shown the court 20 years ago, when he swore it was just an accident. Ryan bent down, trembling fingers reaching for it. The engraving was still visible. "To Dad." He stumbled back, shaking his head. No, that was taken. The sound cut him off. Tap, tap, tap. Thomas stepped into the light, his gray coat clinging to him, his cap shadowing his face. He said nothing. His eyes, cold, patient, remembering, locked on the man before him. Ryan tried to speak, but no words came. "It was an accident," he finally stammered, voice breaking. Thomas didn't blink. He took one step closer. Ryan backed up until his heel hit the barricade. "You can't prove anything," he said, louder now, desperate. "It's over, old man. It's been 20 years. Thomas stopped 2 feet away. The rain hit his shoulders, streaming down his face like tears he no longer had. He lifted the stick slightly, letting the wooden tip rest against the puddle between them. Ryan's voice wavered. "You don't scare me." But he did. Every muscle in Ryan's body betrayed him. The tremor in his lip, the way his hands hovered near his pockets like he could buy his way out again. Thomas leaned closer, his silence heavier than a scream. Ryan's eyes darted to the whistle in his hand, then back to the old man. "What do you want?" he whispered. Thomas didn't move. He just looked down at the whistle, then back up, his gaze piercing, wordless, final. Ryan's breath hitched. "You think you're a hero? You think this means justice?" His voice cracked into a sob. "You'll rot before anyone believes you." Thomas's stick moved, slow and deliberate, pressing against Ryan's chest. Not hard, just enough to make him feel the weight behind it. The man flinched as if burned. "You can't," he began, but stopped when Thomas's eyes flicked toward the whistle. Ryan's fingers slipped, and it fell into the puddle, splashing red from the light's reflection. In that instant, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating both faces, one twisted in guilt, the other carved by time. Thunder followed, drowning the sound of what came next. When the storm passed, the alley was empty. The puddles rippled under the fading rain, the whistle floating gently among them. Hours later, a janitor found the street deserted except for Ryan's car idling nearby and a single wooden stick lying beside the drain. No footprints, no struggle, just silence. back in his apartment. Thomas hung his coat near the door, every movement slow, measured. He sat by the table, the dim lamp casting long shadows on the wall. The whistle lay before him now, water dripping from its edges. He stared at it for a long time, his face unreadable. The ticking clock above him filled the silence. 12 beats, one for every year his son should have lived beyond that night. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the notebook. Beside Ryan's name, he drew a straight line through it. Clean, final. His hand didn't shake this time. He leaned back in the chair, eyes on the whistle, breath steady but shallow. The stick leaned against the wall near the window, water still glistening along its length. Outside, the storm began to fade, the air heavy and quiet. Thomas exhaled slowly, the faintest trace of relief passing through his face. Not victory, not peace, just the stillness of a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. His gaze drifted to the window. Across the street, the courthouse clock glowed faintly through the mist. Midnight again. It had watched the whole thing. He rose, walked to the window, and stared at it, his reflection merging with the glass. For the first time in years, his lips parted, but no words came. He didn't need them. His silence had already spoken. The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of rain against glass. Soft, rhythmic, almost like tapping. Thomas looked down at the whistle one last time and closed his notebook. He turned off the lamp, and the room fell into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a phone began to ring, unanswered. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again, not from the stick this time, but from the heart of a man who had just remembered how to live without saying a word. Who the hell left us here? David Hensley's voice cracked the quiet morning as he stared down at the stick on his porch. The engraved names gleamed faintly in the sunlight. Ryan Coulter, Luke Marsh, David Hensley. His breath hitched. For a second, he thought it was a prank, some cruel joke from the reporters who kept sniffing around after Ryan's disappearance. But then he saw the tiny forespace below his name, blank, waiting. His knees weakened, the coffee mug trembling in his grip until it fell and shattered, spilling black liquid across the concrete. He looked around. The street was empty, too quiet for a weekday. No cars passing, no neighbors outside. Just wind, soft and slow, brushing against his robe. He stepped back, slamming the door shut, locking it twice. "It's him," he whispered, chest heaving. "He's alive." The security monitor flickered on his wall, showing the empty porch. The stick hadn't moved. But David could feel something still there, a presence, invisible but watching. His hand shook as he reached for the phone, dialing Luke Marsh's number. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Finally, a voicemail. This mailbox is full and cannot accept new messages. David slammed the receiver down, breathing fast. Sweat gathered on his temples. He'd laughed at the news when he first heard Ryan had gone missing. "Drunk idiot probably skipped town," he'd said. But now, the laughter was gone. Now there was fear, old, buried, deserved fear. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed. 12 rings, each one slower than the last. He turned toward the sound and froze. The stick was gone from the porch. He ran to the window, eyes wide, scanning the yard. Nothing, just grass moving with the wind. He staggered back, panic rising in his throat. "No!" he muttered. "No, no, no." The lights flickered. He turned toward the kitchen. There it was. The stick now rested against his table, rainwater dripping from its tip, soaking into the floor. The air around it felt colder, heavier. His hand hovered near the counter, reaching for the drawer where he kept the gun. "I know it's you," he said, voice trembling. "Thomas Reed. You think you're a ghost, but you're just a broken old man." His words echoed hollow through the empty house. Somewhere behind him, a soft knock came at the door. Once, twice, then silence. He gripped the gun now, knuckles white. "Say something," he shouted. Nothing answered. He stepped closer, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a heartbeat. The door handle rattled, slow, testing. He aimed, finger tight on the trigger. The handle stopped moving. Then a faint sound came, a single note, shrill, familiar. The whistle. The same one from the evidence box 20 years ago. His knees nearly gave out. "That's impossible," he whispered. The note came again, this time closer. He turned toward the window, no one there. But outside, in the reflection of the glass, he saw movement, a shape in gray, standing near the gate, head slightly bowed, stick in hand. Thomas. David's throat tightened. He hadn't seen that face in decades, but the eyes were the same, hollow, endless, remembering. He stumbled backward, fumbling the phone again, but the line was dead. The whistle sounded a third time, softer now, almost mournful. He looked back toward the gate, but the old man was gone. The only thing left was the faint sway of the front gate, still open. David dropped to his knees, the gun slipping from his hand. He crawled toward the table, toward the stick, and saw something he hadn't noticed before. The fourth space now carved with fresh letters, Thomas Reed. His breath stopped. The stick wasn't just a warning. It was an ending. His hand pressed to his chest as pain shot through it, sharp and final. His eyes darted to the clock on the wall. 12:59. 1 minute left of the hour. He crawled toward the door, desperate to reach the sunlight, to breathe something other than his own guilt. But as he opened it, he froze again. On the front step lay a photograph, faded, rain-stained, of his younger self standing beside Ryan and Luke, all three laughing near a truck. And in the background of that photo, barely visible but unmistakable, stood Thomas, holding his son's hand. The edges of his vision blurred. The whistle came one last time, long and steady, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. His eyes widened, then closed. The gun lay beside him, unused. The stick remained upright against the table, unmoving. Hours later, when the police arrived after neighbors reported a body, they found no sign of forced entry, no footprints, nothing missing. Just an old man dead of a heart attack, a whistle on the floor beside him, and a wooden stick carved with 4 names. The last one cut so deep it nearly split the grain. Across town, Thomas sat quietly on the edge of his bed, the dim light brushing across his face. His coat hung nearby, still damp from the night before. The radio in the corner murmured faint static, then the faint sound of a news reporter. David Hensley, former local official, was found dead in his home early this morning. Police suspect natural causes. Thomas closed his eyes. His breathing was steady, calm. The stick leaned against the wall beside him. Faint traces of carved was still under his nails. He picked up the whistle from his nightstand, the same one his boy had once blown with joy. For a long time, he just held it, not like a weapon, but like a memory that no longer hurt. He brought it to his lips, blew softly. The sound was faint, fragile, but clear. Then he set it down, eyes fixed on the first light of morning spilling through the curtains. The world was quiet again, not empty, just peaceful. He stood, slow but steady, and walked to the window. Outside, the courthouse clock gleamed gold under the sunrise. He raised his hand slightly, like a silent farewell, and let it fall. A single tear broke loose, tracing down the wrinkles of his cheek before vanishing into his gray beard. Somewhere below, the town began to wake, unaware that justice had already come and gone in the night. Thomas turned away from the window, sat back down, and exhaled. The silence around him felt final, complete, but before closing his eyes, he whispered the only words left in him, soft and steady, a prayer more than a statement. He can rest now. The courthouse clock struck once more. Time had finally listened. Fire, make sure to like this channel, subscribe, and enjoy the videos.